Hey, this is Deji.
And Chris.
Welcome to the Lot1 Podcast. On today's episode, we talk with Tisha Morris about entertainment law and the current landscape in Hollywood. So let's get into that. All right, so we have Tisha Morris on the podcast. She is an entertainment attorney, which we've never had on the podcast before. So I'm pretty excited about, the legal download, basically. So for the people who don't know who you are, do you mind giving us a little bit of your backstory?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
And hopefully I will be the first of many entertainment lawyers on your show. I will tread the way for others. I won't get too nerdy on you guys. But yeah, as a little backstory, I'm based in the LA area, specifically Ojai, just up the road from LA, between LA and Santa Barbara. I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee, the music city, USA, and I have no music talent whatsoever. People ask me that all the time. But I do good music contracts. But my start was as an attorney out of law school, and that got boring pretty quick. And so I do what most attorneys do, and I went to interior design school.
Took
a real a pivot for a few years, and then like most people who go into design school, I started writing books about it. And anyway, the long story short, I come into entertainment law from being an author, actually, in the publishing industry. So I had a lot of experience in the publishing world. And really my passion is books to screen, honestly. But I put my attorney hat back on during the Me Too movement, because I wanted to represent women and diverse voices in the entertainment space, and have those people's backs whose voices and stories need to be heard. So I've been doing this for the last 5-6 years. So here I am.
That's cool that, getting back into it, you're basically called back into it, right?
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of saying it. Yeah. It did feel like a calling. It was actually, I remember the actual moment I was coming out of the RBG film. It was, I think, in like 2018, Ruth Bader Ginsburg film. And I walked out of the theater just crying, because I was like, I had been taking for granted the power that a law degree or a law license can have on the world, and realized that I needed to kind of step into those shoes in a bigger way. So it was a calling.
That's cool. That's really cool. What does a day in your life look like?
Yeah, well, I think like most people, the pre and post COVID day in the life is different, and it involves a lot of Zoom meetings.
Okay.
Which I'm not complaining about. I've always been kind of a tech nerd behind the screen, behind my computer. So I was an early adopter of the online meetings, and the world kind of caught up. But yeah, so I do purely transactional work. So it's all agreements. And so meeting with clients and kind of strategizing what needs to happen. And then honestly, a lot of paperwork. I love what I do, because I love being part of these creative projects and being part of a creative team. The glamour of it is not so much, honestly, but isn't that the case with most vocations?
Are most of your clients on the filmmaking side or the book side, or is it just kind of like a mix of both?
Definitely mostly film, and been doing a lot of production legal, which is getting a production up and ready to be greenlit, and then into post-production distribution. But this week I've had this onslaught of literary agent agreements for some reason, of authors getting, which is great, authors getting agreements from agents, and reviewing those. So I do book stuff, I do film stuff, and I do music, and also influencer and podcast stuff as well. I like the variety, and yet I also like the niche of staying within things that are entertaining and educational.
A new filmmaker is getting their start in the industry. What do you feel like some of their, the pitfalls, the legal pitfalls that they kind of fall into Like right when they're starting out?
Honestly, it's not hiring an attorney earlier. I also had an onslaught for some reason the last 2 weeks of people needing help of being in disputes because there wasn't an agreement in place. And that's really difficult place to be. And when one woman's like, we didn't have a written agreement, but I have 2,000 emails that they can put together what we agreed upon. Well, she's not wrong. An email exchange is legally an agreement, but do you know how long it would take for an attorney to go through 2,000 emails to put together? You're going to end up paying a lot more on the back end if things go awry than if you just had a really simple agreement on the front end. And so that honestly is number one. And also I see it a lot in collaborations, whether it's a writing collaboration or a co-production collaboration, where, on the front end, everyone's excited, everyone's on the same page, or you at least think you are. And then either number one, suddenly there's money on the table and things suddenly aren't as clear as they were. Or number two, things don't go the way you think they are, and suddenly you're having not a meeting of the minds anymore. And so not having an agreement in place on the front end again can really kind of come back around to bite you. And a lot of times that agreement it's not of like, this is mine and this is yours. It's a way to set out expectations. And, this is true for any two people, even like if it's a personal relationship or a business relationship, of like, what are the expectations here? Like, here's my role, here's your role. We're on the same page that this is what we are doing together. And a lot of times that's really what the agreement is about, that being clear on what we think our expectations are going into this.
The answer is implied for this, but when should someone take the step of contacting a entertainment lawyer or whatever? Is it like literally like, oh, I have this idea, I want to work with this person now? Or is it like after you kind of both came to like, we want this? Like, when's the best time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there is kind of that like too early, too late kind of like, there is that window, and it's not like cut and dry, but definitely as soon as you start putting things in writing, and by writing just email exchanges of like, hey, we'll go 50-50 on this, or you'll take care of the post and I'll do whatever. Like, as soon as you start divvying out things, then that's when you want to start putting it in writing. Definitely when there's starting to be obviously investors. If someone's like, hey, I'm going to give you $10,000 to start your film, clearly that needs to start the ball rolling of a budget and a plan, and getting those investor agreements in place. So when there's money, when there's roles being assigned, when there's percentages being discussed. So numbers would be a cue.
The Lot1 Podcast is brought to you by the Tourist Hat Coffee Company. You know what keeps me running on those long film sets, Stagey?
What's that, Chris?
Coffee. And you know what's the worst thing ever?
A swift kick in the pants.
No, bad coffee. So that's why I choose Tourist Hat Coffee Company's high quality coffee beans. Their artisan roasted single origin coffee and handcrafted blends are so much better than those stale stuff you get from those other brands.
Yeah, those things are bad.
Tourist Hat Coffee Company's coffee is artisan roasted, micro roasted, single origin, and their small batch roaster that handcrafts their blends to maximize peak freshness upon delivery. Family owned and operated. What more could you ask for from a coffee company, Deji?
I literally can't think of anything else.
If you're still not sold, a portion of each purchase goes towards contributing to some of their favorite nonprofit organizations, such as Animation Dance Community, Seeds of Hope International, and Beautiful Gate Orphanage.
These guys are good.
Make Tourist Hat Coffee Company your new go-to quality coffee choice with our exclusive offer for you, the Lot1 Podcast listener.
Oh, listen up, guys.
First-time customers can use the code LOT1BOGO at checkout to receive one free bag of coffee when you buy two. That's right, Deji, buy two, get one free.
Whoa,
So head on over to touristhatcoffeecompany.com and use promo code Lot1BOGO at checkout. Again, that is LOT the number 1 BOGO at checkout. Whether you work in the film industry or not and want a delicious cup of coffee, this is the perfect time to stock up on your favorite blends of coffee or try something new. I know I'll be brewing Tourist Hat on my sets moving forward, Deji. Again, that's promo code Lot1BOGO, LOT the number 1 BOGO at checkout to claim your buy 2, get 1 free. Terms and conditions apply. Tourist Hat, coffee that fuels your adventure.
I saw that you said in one of your videos that you should create a work for hire when you first start out in a project, but when you're doing like a free project, like let's say it's like just a collaboration of, let's say your friends or maybe a friend and a couple people that you know, should you still do like a work for hire?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great example. And the answer is yes. And the reason why it's in that example, it's not about the money, it's about the rights and who owns the rights to this. So if you're a friend of yours is acting or directing in a short, film, even if it's something that you don't plan on having commercial gains from, you never know, number one, where it could go. But you don't want later them being like, you didn't have my rights to use my work product in your film. So a work for hire basically says that whatever work that you produce, whether it's directing services or acting services or food services, whatever it is, that I own the copyright to that work. So it's really about intellectual property more than it is about money sometimes, or a lot of times.
How would you phrase that to your fellow collaborators? Because I feel like sometimes in that free collaborative space, you're like, oh, we're like making stuff together, like how would you phrase that to them?
Well, that's a good example of like making sure we're on the same page. Maybe they think they have 50% ownership in this film. And maybe you don't think that. Maybe you think it's 100% and they're just kind of donating their time. So you want to both be clear on where you are. And so you want to find that out on the front end if they're thinking that they're having 50% ownership of this film. So you want to phrase it as a way to say you're protecting them. Like you can phrase it however you want. But I try to make agreements for things that are on set, make it into ideally a document that they could sign on an iPad kind of thing. Maybe not necessarily work for hire because you want to let them take the time, but a release, for example, like someone who's kind of not a main character, but someone who might be, an interview on the road, on the street. You want to get their release and have that easily signable with an iPad or on a clipboard or something, make it easy is always helpful. So work for hire for someone who's actually doing work for you. Otherwise, if it's more of an ownership, then it wouldn't be a work for hire. It would be more of a
like an agreement between the two of you.
Yeah.
Do you mind explaining what a chain of title is?
Yes. And so we're gonna get there sooner or later because it all really does come to that. When I talk about ownership, it really is that chain of title. And so you need to have a clear, what we call chain of title for when it gets sold to or distributed to the bigger players or get an insurance to get it insured. It has to have a clear chain of title. And so a chain of title is nothing but a paper trail to show that goes back to the ownership of the copyrights. Okay, so if it's based on, let's say it's a book to screen, and it was maybe from an option purchase agreement from that author to the purchaser. And so that agreement that's transferring the rights, the copyrights, will be the first part of that chain of title. So there's nothing really magical about the chain of title. It's not like some ledger. Maybe one day it will be on the blockchain or something. That would be cool. I think maybe eventually it will be. But for now, there's not really any like ledger. It's like a paper trail. And the paper trail is these agreements. And so that's another reason you want to have clear agreements to show that if you are the filmmaker, that you do own all the rights to this film.
I don't think when you're first starting out, that's something that you're ever thinking about.
Right.
Like, especially like the rights, and then like, you go to get the insurance, or you go to, sell, and you're like, oh, well, now I gotta go back and do all that work. And now time has passed, and now they know that people are interested in the project, so maybe the leverage is gone now. So
right.
So in terms of like, if you're a small creator or a filmmaker, we're all creators, right? If you're a small filmmaker and you can't afford a attorney or a entertainment lawyer to write you these things and stuff, what is the best, other than like written agreements, what is the best practice you could take to make sure you have ownership of the content you're creating? Because if it's going on like a public space like YouTube or like social media, like what is the best practices to take,
I mean, if you don't plan on any commercial end for this project, then yeah, the stakes are pretty low. But if you do have any ambition for this project, then I would do what you can, honestly, to get an attorney. I don't think they cost as much as people think they do, or at least I don't think I charge as much as people might think one does. And maybe even like, if it's a passion project, maybe they could even, do a percentage or for a credit or something. So I would not completely rule out that possibility, first of all. Second of all, if you use an agreement off of the internet, or that your friend gave you, you can kind of get by with that, I guess. But, agreements are always drafted in favor of one side or the other. I've never seen any agreement that's like 50-50 fair. It's always drafted in the favor of the drafter. And you don't know if it's off the internet, which side drafted it, that you got it from. And so the terms are going to really be skewed. So you have to really know, it might still have like the provisions laid out, like the assignment and the grant of rights and whatever, the titles might be the same, but the language within it is going to differ. I mean, even the word not, N-O-T, before something completely changes the meaning of something. So the devil really is in the details when it comes to agreements. And so before you use one off the internet, just be mindful of that. Yeah.
Oh, that's really good advice, because I know there's a lot of people who just use it off the internet. So
let's say you've gotten to the point where you're in talks with a streamer or something like that, and you're selling. How much leverage do you actually have to negotiate your contract?
Well, I mean, if you're negotiating with a studio, then you probably have a track record already. Rarely do you go from 0 to 60. And so you have a basis that you've already kind of worked from. Usually if you're going to a streamer, then you have a producing partner in terms of already been kind of through an agreement, have already been kind of, the expectations or the percentages have already kind of been negotiated to a certain extent. So there's kind of there's stages to get there to where you're not going to be completely blind and going into that of what the expectations are.
You haven't seen very often, if ever, a person who is like, you've done one small thing and then they just like get a Netflix deal.
I haven't seen that. That doesn't mean that hasn't happened. And it's, I think, getting harder just because as the big studios and streamers pull back, they're relying on their heavy hitters more. The Wild West of content is over, for now. And so maybe there were some more of that in the 2019 through 2021 of kind of hitting one out of the ballpark. But I don't think you're going to be seeing that much in the near future.
Hey, movie buffs, it's Deji. When the mics are off, we spill the beans on the Lot1 Podcast after show, only on Patreon. So, if you like getting early access to episodes, sipping tea, hearing untold stories of behind-the-scenes magic, connecting with filmmakers, and more, hit us up on Patreon at patreon.com/Lot1 Podcast, and we'll be sipping tea together.
This is just like, I've been curious about this forever because I don't know how this all works. This is all a mystery to me because I've never worked at the level of needing a lawyer. I'm sure I have, not realizing I needed a lawyer, but like, you get what I'm saying. In terms of like, okay, if you're a creator, you make this big movie, and with the studio, obviously there's an agreement there of like ownership of rights. But like, I think about like the old big time producers who like own all these IPs. I'm assuming it's a joint, like both parties own it, both producer and studio. So like, what does that agreement look like? Like, who is it typically, like a 50-50? Is it like, oh, to make the next Jurassic Park movie, we need agreement from all producers and studio? Or like, can the original creators, like, could Spielberg just be like, no, I don't want you guys to make another one, and then that's it? Like, what does that kind of agreement kind of look like?
Well, there's a lot of different ways something can end up on, let's say, Netflix, because Netflix does a lot of different things. In some ways, they are just a distributor, and in other ways, they are actually getting the showrunner and making the film with original content. They do a lot of different things. They have some first look deals, although I think those have been pulled back quite a lot. First look deals with well-known showrunners.
What's a first look deal?
So it would be a well-known, either a showrunner like J.J. Abrams, Shonda Rhimes had it, I think, with like ABC, where, but also it can happen with studios and production companies. So Lot1 Productions has a first look deal with Sony, and so anything that you were to come up with, Sony gets right of first refusal. So if you're like, I have this great new show coming up, and stars a robot and whatever, and Sony would have the first look to be able to say, hey, yeah, we want it. So yeah, going back to your question, Christopher, there's just so many ways, and that's honestly part of why I do like my job. I hate this phrase, but there's so many ways to skin a cat in this business, and there isn't one just like cut and dry way of doing things. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure Netflix, they do have their standard agreements. This is for this and this is for this, and like their actual templates. But as far as this is the path to get on Netflix, I don't think it exists, and it happens in a lot of different ways.
Can you explain what the difference between a creator economy and a community economy is?
Yeah. So, we've been in this, what we've been calling creator economy, which is, a lot of this term has been a lot around influencers and how influencers and social media. But it also has trickled into music artists and talent on all sides being creators. Basically, really creators are just making content for big tech to make money from. Like that, we're creating their economy by creating content, is really what it's saying. But I think we're moving into where we have to look beyond just ourselves as a creator, and building communities is going to be kind of the 3.0 iteration of that. And where we have to be a brand, but we also have to create communities, which that is kind of what has been happening with obviously social media for years. But now we're seeing it more and more in film and TV, or film for production, for producers and directors, where you have to have, very similar to music artists. It's like I've been to a bunch of conferences this year in all entertainment sectors, and in film and TV and music and publishing, and everyone's saying the same things. You basically have to be a brand, and you have to build a community around you and your brand. And so we're going to see this even more with filmmakers. A filmmaker or a studio or a production company really becoming a brand, and creating their fan base. And that's going to be where it is.
Maybe a bit of the onus on the creator to bring audience to the table.
That's right.
For the streamers or the studios.
Yeah, it's the same thing in book publishing. Everyone wants the big 5 deal with Simon Schuster, whatever, because of the visibility, right? In music, everyone wants to deal with one of the labels, so they can have their music on the shelves, which don't really exist anymore. And then in film and TV, everyone wants either the studio or streamer. Those are like the hallmarks of what you're aiming for. But most people fall somewhere in the tiers below that. And the truth is, regardless of wherever you fall, you have to do all your own marketing now. Like even the music labels cut budgets with that. Book publishing has cut budgets with that. On that, even if you were to get on Amazon Prime, you're one of thousands of films trying to get visibility now. It all is falling back on the creator to create their communities, to create their fan base, to get the visibility. And so in some ways it's daunting because like most creators, we want to create. We don't want to be marketing engines. And I can speak for myself as an author, like, being a promoter of my books is like so painful. And unfortunately it is, it's essential and inevitable. So we have so much opportunity as creators in any sector, and yet we also have so much to do.
Yeah. I have a question about, so in some of these contracts that you're seeing, is there language around, having, like that sort of community or that sort of influence?
I'm speaking more of independent filmmakers who are kind of in control of their destiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Or just, if you get a distribution deal on Tubi or Pluto or Amazon Prime, for it to get the visibility that you want.
So on the platforms that are like the paid ones where you get paid per click, I see, yeah, per view. That, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very similar to music artists on Spotify. You got to bring the audience to download your music.
I'd be curious to pick your brain about, do we feel like, I mean, I've never seen a deal between a influencer, like a great example is like Markiplier just released a TV show that was put on Amazon and made it into like the top 10. It's like, that's a whole different drama. Like there's some things with that, but specifically he's clearly bringing his tens of millions of viewers that he gets on YouTube to that platform. Do you think that like we're going to start seeing a shift where it's like now that these influencers or brands and creators have so much power because they're bringing the audience, that kind of like the power shift in the contract is going to switch away from the studio to the creator? And instead of like, oh, if you get X amount of views, we'll give you money, it's versus like, no, if you want to buy my audience, you got to give me money, sort of type of thing, or I don't know.
I mean, it definitely comes into play in the talent, in the performer agreement. I mean, or if you get hired as a performer, yes, your visibility, your fan base, and what you can bring to it, absolutely. And I think this is we see this big in reality shows. I mean, these reality people that they choose because they have big Instagram followings, or TikTok or whatever. I mean, if it's a smaller budget, then it's probably you're not going to have A-list talent, but you could have A-list, follower talent. Yeah, definitely, it's a consideration. And I do find with the performer agreements, their publicity requirements is a very heavily negotiated area of what they're required to do publicity wise.
I kind of wanted to go into, sort of your thoughts about AI. What are you seeing in the world of AI in relation to like entertainment law?
Well, it hasn't taken my job yet, so
that's good news.
Well, it may have actually. It may have taken some clients that I don't know about. But as far as in the entertainment industry in general, there's no doubt it's going to have a huge impact. I mean, it already is, and it's hard to decipher. It's hard to distinguish what effect it had because it all kind of happened at the same time with the strikes, the streamer pullback because of Wall Street. It all kind of happened at the same time, and so it's hard to know which came first as far as how AI is affecting the pullbacks. But it all happened at a convenient time for the studios to kind of take a step back and kind of, I don't know about experiment is the right word, but start to integrate it. And I think it's still just a huge unknown of how it's going to be used. I mean, it's already being used in pre-production and in all stages of production. Actually, it's already being used. How many jobs taken? I don't know. I think we're going to see a big polarity in AI driven content and kind of old school, we'll call old school made content. But even that, I mean, I think we're getting to a point where your job's not going to be taken by AI. Your job's going to be taken by someone who knows how to use AI. And and that's at all stages, whether you're a director, doing post, whatever the case is. I highly recommend learning AI platforms, embracing it, and using it for your job, for you to be more efficient at whatever you're doing. That's going to be the way to stay on top of things. But as far as like, using the replicas and, CAA now has the CAA vault, which is where they store their clients, or whichever clients opt in, their digital replica, to be, so that it's kind of safeguarded and then I guess negotiated as well for their talent. I don't know. I kind of, how valuable is Harrison Ford's replica going to be after he dies? Some people think that will be really valuable. I think it will be for these like, iconic people like, the Elvis Presleys of our time and so forth. But as far as making an Indiana Jones movie after he's passed, I have my doubts on the value in that. I trust that there's enough good talent alive and coming up that we don't have to resurrect the dead. But that's my feelings on the digital replicas.
Hey, unlock exclusive interviews, explore diverse roles in the film industry, and join the cinematic journey on our Patreon at patreon.com/Lot1 Podcast.
We are already seeing so much like remakes and like, I feel like we should slow down if we can on that and start coming up with some like original content.
Something that I've brought up on this podcast a lot is how copyright law is going to work with artificial intelligence. And I've used this example plenty of times. So if regular listeners, I apologize. But if you have an AI, everyone has their AIs at home, right? You sit in front of your TV and you say, I want a Superman movie in the style of James Cameron starring Deji Bancole. And then it pops it out, right? Copyright. Like the social issue of like sharing, and now we can't share the same things and learn new things about different cultures and stuff is different. But in terms of like, Superman's owned by Warner Brothers. So how would that work? Do we think we're going to see laws that prohibit AI from, if it's not the AI of Warner Brothers or one that is licensed of Warner Brothers content, are we going to see like stops to that? Like, how do you think we see that playing out? Or, I mean, that's a very dystopian version of AI, but like that is a good example.
No, it's not dystopian. No, no, you have just reiterated about the fact pattern of about 100 cases pending right now in courts. So your question is of its time. Yeah, it is pending. And unfortunately, the courts can't keep up with the quickness that everything has happened. So these copyright cases are all pending. OpenAI, all the big tech companies have major lawsuits against them by big, like Authors Guild has a whole suit, tons of authors, the record labels, for similar reasons you just said of like, make me a song in the style of, Chris Cornell or whatever. Yeah, these cases are pending. No one knows how it's going to play out or how to even, even if there's like a firm ruling, how to even enforce it and regulate it.
Yeah. Especially if they're already trained on it, like.
Yeah. I personally think that, the publishers, all the creator companies should be issued a blanket license from the tech companies, similar to like a blanket license that they're paid for, that trickles down to the creators. This is what they do in music for, like, a blanket license to play, songs in restaurants and stuff like that. So that there needs to be some compensation for creators for using their work to create new works. Now, there's a part of copyright law that's if a new work has been transformed enough, then it's a new creation. That's what keeps people creating, and so that things don't become stagnant. That's the argument on that big tech is using, that these are transformative works and therefore fall outside of copyright. So we'll see how it plays out, but you're exactly right.
I mean, it's interesting. One of my questions was, how can creatives protect themselves from the work being used to populate large learning models? I mean, it sounds like, is it even possible?
I don't know of any way, honestly. You might be if you're concerned, if you're creating something like Adobe, the Adobe platform now, you have to opt in for them to use your material in Gen AI, and you have no choice. I mean, either if you're going to use it, you have no choice. And so, that might make you think twice about using Adobe software.
For people at home, so if you're editing on Adobe, the work that you are using will be used to then generate.
Yes. They have access to it, even it's not even like exported versions. Like they can literally, with the uploads in the Adobe Cloud, can use everything in your cloud storage to use for their generative AI. It's crazy. Yeah. It's literally crazy.
So, when you're talking about the trickle down, or that blanket agreement, I thought before, all right, like there should be some sort of way that these large learning models, so thank you. They are, doing all these calculations, they're pulling things. There should be another learning model that can go into this one and then do all the backwards things. Okay, well, this part came from here and there, and then this is where the source was. I feel and then maybe we can get the people paid, whatever the percentage that it was being used. It seems to me that might be a thing.
I 100% agree with you. And here's where I think eventually down the road, I think this is actually where the blockchain, if we circle back to the NFT blockchain world that kind of went dormant, I think that's where it's going to come back and play. Because that's the beauty of blockchain, is it is a ledger that documents everything. And so if all copyrighted material was put on a blockchain, then everything would be traceable in the way you just said it. So but we're a ways away from that.
So we're getting closer to the end, but we do actually have an audience question.
All right.
This is from an audience member who is in a law school right now. And they say, how are the opportunities different doing entertainment law at a big firm versus a boutique entertainment firm?
Well, gosh, you can't go wrong either way. If you have the opportunity, do both. Clerk at a big firm, get a job at a boutique firm, do it all. They each offer a different experience for obvious reasons. The big firm experience is going to give you kind of that, like that feeling like you're on Suits with the, big high rise and, all that, free Cokes in the break room. You might not have as much hands-on. You're going to kind of do probably a little more grunt work potentially. But it probably depends on which partners or senior associates you work with and how hands-on they are with you. With a boutique firm, you might, again, it also depends on who your person is, if they're going to be more hands-on with you and kind of help teach you the ropes, which in a boutique firm is more likely, because if you do a good job, they're going to want you to stay on. Of course, that's the case with the big firm as well. If you can kind of get in a track to where if you can find out if it's a place you do want to work long-term. So that's also a consideration. But it really is. I've always been more of a boutique person myself. But the big firm was exciting for when it was. So it's hard to resist the free snacks.
Okay, so Chris has a final question. He always asks our guests.
Always. Okay, so normally I ask this of it's typically what's the best piece of advice you could give someone who wants to be a producer, whatever. So I'm gonna be more specific with you. What is the one piece of advice / the best piece of advice you could give a creative / filmmaker in terms of what you do as an entertainment lawyer?
Put things in writing. Just write it down, and each of you exchange emails or whatever for that. But as far as actually, I'm going to veer off a little bit and go more into the creative aspect. And if you are a new filmmaker, I would start a YouTube channel. Really hone in on your voice, being your brand and your voice, your POV, and start making shorts, putting them on your channel, and starting to create an audience for your channel. Do short form videos over the shorts to put on TikTok and Instagram, and start building a following. Maybe show the films at a local, for sure, film festival, even if there's like a local theater in your area, or like tag it on with another friend doing something else production wise with it. Just get people into what you're doing, and have a POV, have a strong voice in your filmmaking. Like I have a friend, a production friend, colleague, who she has a specialty with ocean film, like ocean documentaries, and not to pigeonhole, you have to just be this one thing. But if you can have, particularly with documentaries, it's usually, mission driven. But usually maybe you're a horror person, or maybe you're a rom-com person. Not that you can't veer off, but you want to start building a brand and a voice around your work.
We recently went to a film festival that we sort of like came to the consensus that we need to start just putting out more and more content, and to sort of echo that, the community economy, where we've got to start building things around our creativity, because somebody out there is going to like the same kind of stuff that you like, and so it's got to find them all, put them all in the same area.
Yeah. And also I will say this, like, don't worry about being copied, or your material getting stolen or whatever. Like I see that so often. It's like, no, if you're like an undiscovered filmmaker, your biggest challenge is being seen, not being stolen from. So don't not put something out because you're afraid it's going to get pirated or whatever. File it with the copyright. Like do the legal protections that are smart. But other than that, like, get your stuff out there, be seen.
Well, thank you so much, Tisha, for coming on the podcast with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
For the people at home who want to hear more about you, maybe get in contact, maybe if they need some legal advice, where can they reach you?
My website is morrisentertainmentlaw.com. You can also get there from attorneytisha.com, if that's more memorable. So yeah, check me out. You can contact me. I do 15-minute free consultations where I give you as much as I can, free advice in that 15 minutes. I have a TikTok channel, which you've referenced, with a lot of great videos for tips as well. So check me out on TikTok. Pretty easy to find.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you hopefully sometime soon.
All right. Thanks, Deji and Christopher.
Thanks.
Bye. That's a wrap for today's Lot1 podcast. Huge thanks to our sponsor, Tourist Hat Coffee Company. Remember to use the discount code LOT1BOGO for your exclusive buy two, get one free deal. Again, that is discount code Lot1 BOGO, LOT1 BOGO at checkout for your exclusive deal. Thanks for tuning in, folks. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, and leave a review and share it with your best editor friend. It really helps others find us. Big shout out to our producer, Mina Vazarian, and our editor, Carlos Luna. If you're not part of our exclusive Patreon community yet, head on over to patreon.com/the Lot1 Podcast for early access, bonus content like the after show, and more. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to our incredible Patreon supporters. Yeah, you. Your backing keeps the Lot1 Podcast lights on. Connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at the Lot1 Podcast for behind-the-scenes content and updates. We're also accepting listener mail. So got any questions for our guests or us, drop us a line. Also, if you're interested in finding out more about Lot1 Productions and all we got going on over at our area, check us out at lot1productions.com. LOT1 productions.com. Until next time, keep those creative fires burning, dream big, and remember the filmmaking journey is a ride worth taking. So, see you next week.